Confessions, EPOV. I waited at the edge of the meadow, still hiding under the shade of the tress. Bella walked slowly through the grass, eyes alight with wonder, and I couldn't help but smile right along with her. I wondered how long it would take her to notice I was no longer following her. She usually seemed all too aware of my presence. I watched her, thrilled to see the place that had brought me so much joy was making her happy as well. I wanted desperately to join her, yet I couldn't bring myself to step out into the sunlight. I wanted her to truly take in all the beauty of my personal sanctuary before I forever changed by adding the image of myself to it. Of course she would be frightened, I didn't doubt that for a moment. Secretly I'd wondered many times if the only reason Bella still didn't fear me was because I was so practiced at acting human around her. Aside from whatever fantasies her imagination had created, which in all honesty were probably nothing near the truth, she'd never seen me actually look like a vampire. Today I was going to show her something that would make me appear far from human, and she would be afraid. The side of me that wanted to protect her told me that was a good thing, but the side that had already grown too attached to our time together was terrified. As if sensing where my thoughts had taken me, she turned to look for me. I was surprised that her expression was concerned, and feared for a moment that I had walked too far into the sun and inadvertently revealed the truth before I was ready. Then her eyes found mine and her face instantly softened. She took a step towards me and reached her hand out like she wanted me to take it and join her. As much as I wanted to hold her hand in mine, longed to feel that spark her touch always ignited, I refused to feel the rejection that would most certainly follow when she saw my skin in the light. I couldn't bear to feel her hand ripped away from mine when the repulsion set in, so I held it up, silently urging her to wait just a little longer. I sighed and took in a deep breath of air I didn't need, and prepared for the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. As I stepped out into the light I kept my eyes firmly locked with hers, determined to see her initial reaction, and also not wanting to see the reflection off my skin. Yet I was unable to avoid seeing it reflect off of her own soft, perfect face, and I closed my eyes in frustration. Taking another unnecessary breath, I prepared for the worst. When I opened my eyes, would she still be standing with me or would she have turned and ran, praying I wouldn't follow her? Reminding myself that a part of me wanted her to run, I forced my eyes open. And she was still standing in front of me, closer even than she was before, though I couldn't understand how. Unable to make sense of her expression and as always wishing I could read her mind, I pleaded to her with my eyes. "Please tell me what you're thinking," they urged, and as if she had suddenly figured out how to read my mind, she reached out and took my hand and led me further into the meadow. Gently pulling me down with her, she crossed her legs and sat in the grass. Her eyes, warm and adoring and completely undeserved, never left mine. Whatever it was that kept her from being afraid of me the way any other human would seemed to still be intact, despite my inarguably inhuman appearance. Though all I wanted was to bask in the sun with her and revel in the awe of her acceptance of me, I reminded myself why I had brought her here. I'd vowed to myself to be completely honest, even if it meant the day ending with her wanting nothing to do with me. If she was determined to try to be with me, she needed to know everything, the complete truth, hiding nothing. There was so very much to say. As difficult as it was for me to accept, Bella still seemed completely at ease around me. In fact, she looked fascinated, watching me like she wanted to touch my ridiculous skin. Deciding that the best way to proceed with our day of truth was to just be myself, I laid down in the grass facing up to the sky and closed my eyes. I tried to believe I was capable of acting the way I normally would if this was any other sunny day in my hideaway. I could pretend she wasn't there staring at me. I could convince myself not to notice the way the breeze was mingling her scent with the wildflowers and making my sanctuary nearly unbearable. Abruptly I opened my eyes, terrified that I had already let my thoughts take me to the darkest of places, and focused again on her and the way she was watching me. There was no fear there, though I couldn't understand how. There was only warmth and affection. I let my eyes close once more and started singing softly under my breath, the way I always did when I needed to find peace. I wasn't if she could see my lips move, though I was positive she couldn't hear me, but eventually she asked what I was doing. I told her simply that I was singing, but inside I wondered if she would ever know that although my voice was too soft for human ears, my heart was singing to her. I didn't expect her to close her eyes or lay down next to me. Even with her apparent lack of fear, she couldn't possibly want to put herself in such a vulnerable position. Every now and then, I would peek at her through barely opened eyes, just to see if anything in her expression had changed. She still watched me with curious eyes, and the slightest hint of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Just as I was about to chance another glimpse at her, I felt her finger brush against the back of my hand. My eyes flew open and I gazed wide-eyed at her. Unconsciously, I felt myself grin, baffled by why she would want to touch me but thoroughly enjoying the sensation of her warm skin on mine. Though I wasn't sure I was quite ready to hear the answer, I couldn't help asking the question I'd been holding in since I first stepped into the sunlight. "I don't scare you?" I asked, still smiling yet fighting against the pain I knew would come if her answer was yes. "No more than usual," she replied casually, and I smiled wider as I realized she was telling me the truth. She always told me the truth, absurd as it might be. My smile must have encouraged her, because she scooted a fraction of an inch closer and let the rest of her fingertips run along my forearm. Her hand was shaking and I closed my eyes again, hoping the fear I'd been dreading wasn't finally starting to set in. "Do you mind?" she asked timidly, and I had to stifle a laugh. Did I mind? Her touch was the greatest feeling I'd experienced in the whole of my existence. "No," I answered, debating how much I should say. Then remembering my vow of honesty I added, "You can't imagine how that feels." With a sigh, I let my body sink further into the grass as her hand continued to trace my arm. I could feel her moving toward the inside of my elbow, so when she reached for my hand, I flipped it over, palm up. I must have moved too quickly because her fingers froze in place. I opened my eyes, desperate again to read her expression. She was startled, but there was still no trace of fear and I allowed my eyes to close once more. "Sorry," I mumbled, wishing she could understand just how strange all this was for me. I've never allowed myself to be anything less than human around her before, yet already it felt right and natural. "It's too easy to be myself with you." She continued inspecting my hand, then out of nowhere I could feel her breath on my skin. I looked up to see my hand inches from her face. I was so close to her, and in that moment the intensity of the desire I'd been working so hard to control was almost too much. I needed a distraction. Very quickly. "Tell me what you're thinking," I said softly, not wanting to alarm her with the severity of my voice. "It's still so strange for me, not knowing." "You know, the rest of us feel that way all the time," she said sarcastically. Internally I praised her for being able to lighten the moment when it was most crucial for her survival. Though I was trying not to focus on it, the realization of the danger that had just passed hit me. I tried to keep my voice relaxed, though knowing Bella, she'd see right through me. "It's a hard life," I said, wishing with everything in me that I had some semblance of a normal life to give to her. She didn't deserve the kind of life I had to offer, yet it was all I had to give. And undoubtedly I would give her everything I had. The original reason for my question had all but vanished, but she still hadn't told me what she was thinking, and now I was curious. "But you didn't tell me," I reminded her gently, hoping she hadn't been trying to distract me because she didn't want to answer. "I had to know. I was wishing I could know what you were thinking." Her voice trailed off like she was waiting for me to tell her. Maybe it was selfish, but I had already revealed so much of myself to her, and now it was my turn. I had asked first and I needed to hear the truth before anything else was said. "And?" I said simply, unwilling to budge just this once. "I was wishing that I could believe that you were real. And I was wishing that I wasn't afraid." And there it was. I felt my breath catch as I took in her words. She was afraid. Of course she was afraid. She was just very, very good at hiding it from me. "I don't want you to be afraid," I said hopelessly. Foolishly. "Well, that's not exactly the fear I meant," though that's certainly something to think about. Quickly and without thinking, I sat myself halfway up and leaned onto my arm, my other hand unfathomably still in her hand. Why had she not let go yet? She'd just told me she was afraid, yet she was still looking at me with those kind eyes, tender and not afraid at all. As I put her expression together with her words, they took on new meaning and sang through my mind like a beautiful symphony. Not exactly the fear I meant. If she wasn't afraid for her safety, what else there was for her to be afraid of? My mind raced through every possibility until I remembered her conversation with Jessica, the one she knew I was listening to.